Step off the plane in Michigan today, and you might think you landed in a different country. Not the same state that once promised middle-class dreams and steady paychecks. What happened isn't slow decay, it's freefall. Seen from a drone, it's a map of decline. But for those walking the streets, it's not a statistic. It's a daily fight for dignity, for shelter, for a reason to keep going.
And it's hard to keep a hold of our tents because you got homeless people out there stealing from the homeless people.
Oh my gosh. It's going.
Yeah, definitely. Detroit's not the easiest city to be homeless in.
I don't see nothing, ahead of that.
It's hard to believe, but the people facing this crisis aren't just the unemployed. They are retired mechanics, grocery clerks, teachers, even full-time workers with nowhere to go. So what has pushed them into a state of homelessness? Is it the soaring rent? Is the salary not keeping up with the cost of living? Or is it the social system itself that is contributing to the pressure on them? And even more alarming, if this trend continues and goes unchecked, places like Detroit, Flint, and Grand Rapids will no longer be exceptions, but the future of all of Michigan. The truth is even worse than you think. Let's explore the homelessness crisis in Michigan, where the American dream is slowly turning into a nightmare. As usual, this is not a pessimistic warning, but a perspective reflecting multiple sources to help the community understand better and prepare proactively. Are you ready to explore the dark side of the most vibrant and luxurious city in America? Let's start right now. Michigan, once known as the proud engine of America's industry, is now facing a quiet emergency, and it's spreading fast. For many, the bright promise of the American dream, a stable job, a home, a future for their children, is slowly turning into a nightmare. You know, the dazzling lights of the Renaissance Center in Detroit, a symbol of economic revival, stand just blocks away from makeshift camps where families are now living inside minivans parked beneath broken streetlights. This distance feels like two opposing worlds. On one side, luxury condos advertise rooftop lounges and secure parking, while on the other, thousands crowd into makeshift tents, trying to survive each day. It is no longer a hidden corner, but a heartbreaking reality in the heart of what was once one of America's wealthiest industrial states.
Well, but it's too expensive to live out here.
In just the last decade, the number of people without stable housing across Michigan has skyrocketed by over 30%, according to data from the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. In cities like Detroit, Flint, and Lansing, the rise is even more staggering. Detroit alone reports more than 10,000 residents experiencing housing instability on any given night. In Flint, that number has nearly doubled since 2018, and Grand Rapids, once considered a safe pocket, now struggles with overcrowded shelters and growing encampments along riverbanks and industrial lots. But these are not just numbers. The shift is visible. Drive down once busy streets near shuttered auto plants, and you'll see tents pitched near loading docks, bus stops turned into makeshift bedrooms, empty lots now lined with tarps and fold-out chairs. Even just 1 mile from what used to be bustling city centers, thousands of people now wander aimlessly, hopelessly. This reality raises many questions. Can Michigan overcome this crisis? Or is this the stark picture of an American dream that is gradually fading, much like the paint chipping off an old wall until nothing is left but the bare structure underneath? Let's take a closer look. It's easy to hear homeless and picture someone else. But in Michigan today, many who've lost their homes once lived lives that look just like yours or mine. One thing you would never expect is that even people with master's degrees, or those who work their entire lives, can suddenly find themselves on the streets.
They moved to Canada. I was working for a hire company, and after they moved, I had a couple of heart attacks.
This individual's predicament highlights how a single, unforeseen event can trap anyone in a vicious cycle, regardless of their past achievements. This isn't an isolated incident. In Michigan today, Losing housing isn't always the result of years of hardship. For many, it takes just one moment, one missed paycheck, one unexpected medical bill, one layoff, to fall from stability into crisis. Think of a 61-year-old former stamping plant worker from Flint who dedicated decades to their craft, raised a family, and paid off a mortgage, only to find themselves sleeping in their pickup truck after plant closures and health issues made it impossible to secure new employment. Or a 44-year-old former public school teacher in Lansing who, after sacrificing her career to care for an ailing parent, found herself without income or a place to live, now struggling to find work without a stable address. And not far from Kalamazoo, a 28-year-old former warehouse supervisor, a young, hard-working individual, now sleeps in a commercial plaza stairwell, unable to afford rising rents despite juggling multiple temporary jobs. These aren't rare stories. They're becoming the norm across Michigan, and for thousands, the path back isn't clear. No affordable rent, no room in shelters, no interviews without addresses, no rest without worry. So when we talk about the homeless crisis in Michigan, we're not just talking about hardship, we're talking about people who did everything right and still ended up with nowhere to go. And the deeper question remains, if they couldn't make it, what does that mean for the rest of us? Not stopping there, the residents of Michigan, many of whom have endured economic hardships and natural disasters, now have to face another shock: skyrocketing rental prices. Living in Michigan today, especially in its major cities, is much worse than you think. Everything is expensive. If you're not earning a substantial income, think carefully before dreaming about a stable life here. Let's look at the numbers first. According to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Michigan has surpassed $1,050 per month. In cities like Ann Arbor, Traverse City, and even parts of suburban Detroit, that figure climbs even higher, easily reaching over $1,300 or more. At the same time, the statewide minimum wage remains at a mere $10.33 per hour. Do the math. A full-time worker earning minimum wage in Michigan brings in about $1,650 a month before taxes. That means more than 60% of their income could go just to rent, and that doesn't include utilities, transportation, insurance, or food. It's a fragile equation, and one small shift, an illness, a childcare gap, or a rent increase is enough to break it. Local housing advocates in Ypsilanti describe an alarming increase in working families asking for assistance after landlords raise rent mid-lease or decide to sell. One tragic case involved a family of 4 whose $900 rent became $1,300 overnight. With no notice, no legal support, and limited rental options nearby, they moved into a relative's basement with no clear timeline for what's next. In Detroit, tenants on fixed incomes face a different pressure. A retired bus driver explained, "My pension is steady. My costs are not. Every year rent goes up, but my check stays the same. It's not sustainable." More than 50% of renters across Michigan are now considered cost-burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. For many, it's not just an inconvenience, it's a constant risk. And what happens when that line is crossed? For some, it's moving into smaller and more crowded spaces. For others, it means skipping medical appointments, delaying car repairs, or going without heat in the winter just to pay the landlord on time. In Kalamazoo, a local shelter worker said this: "We're not just seeing people who've lost everything. We're seeing people trying to hold on to everything and just running out of ways to make it work." And while eviction moratoriums brought temporary relief during the pandemic, those protections have largely expired. In some counties, court filings for eviction have nearly doubled compared to 2019. The pressure is mounting quietly. Without the spectacle of boarded-up homes or sprawling encampments, the crisis becomes easier to ignore. But it is no less real, because behind each rent check that barely clears, behind each delayed prescription, behind every family counting down the days to the first of the month, is someone trying to stay housed in a system that no longer favors stability. Across Michigan, a growing number of residents are discovering a hard truth. Even full-time work doesn't always guarantee a roof over your head. This isn't a dystopian fantasy. This is the daily reality in Michigan, a place where the concept of development is gradually being distorted. No longer is it about inclusion, but rather a silent process of pushing out those who can't keep up. In Grand Rapids, a 39-year-old sanitation worker clocks in 5 days a week. His shifts begin before dawn, and he rarely misses a day. Yet for the past year, he's been living out of a borrowed sedan, parking overnight in rotating lots to avoid attention. Despite steady employment, first and last month's rent, credit checks, and waiting lists have all become barriers he cannot cross. His story is not rare. In fact, recent data from the Michigan League for Public Policy shows that more than 1 in 4 working adults facing housing insecurity in the state are employed full-time. Many work in industries that support daily life. Grocery clerks, delivery drivers, nursing assistants, maintenance staff. Their work is essential, but increasingly undervalued in a market that rewards income far beyond what these roles provide. Consider this. The average rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in Michigan has climbed above $1,100 per month. Meanwhile, someone earning Michigan's minimum wage of $10.33 per hour would need to work over 100 hours a month just to afford that rent, before paying for food, transportation, or childcare. Even those earning closer to $18 to $20 an hour often find themselves stretched thin. Add in the rising cost of utilities, fuel, and groceries, and it becomes a daily calculation. What can be delayed, skipped, or sacrificed just to stay housed? Many have turned to shared housing arrangements, sleeping in their vehicles, or couch surfing with friends. For others, temporary shelter isn't an option, either because beds are full, rules are restrictive, or they don't meet eligibility criteria. And the longer someone remains unhoused, the harder it becomes to break the cycle. Without an address, job applications go unanswered. Without stable rest, work performance suffers. The line between working and struggling becomes paper thin. For middle-aged workers, especially those without college degrees or family safety nets, the options are few. Some delay medical care. Others work multiple jobs, sleeping only a few hours a night. A few even continue to pay union dues or professional licenses in the hope that opportunity might return. So the question becomes, in a state where work once meant stability, what happens when that promise no longer holds? And how many more hard-working residents will find themselves living in the shadows, not for lack of trying, but because the math no longer works? Every day, every minute, every second, anyone can become homeless. That is a harsh truth that Michigan definitely doesn't want you to know. The pre-retirement age adults of 2025 were once the backbone that built Michigan into what it is today. They paid taxes, using their hands to wrap up a lifetime of sacrifice, labor, and contribution. They are the ones who laid the first bricks for the factories in Detroit, once drove buses in Lansing, once taught in public schools in Grand Rapids, once tended the gardens and city streets. They are veterans, construction workers, retired teachers, those who believed that if they worked hard all their lives, in the end, they would have a place to return to. But today, if you step out of downtown Michigan cities, it won't be hard to spot an elderly man huddled under a bridge or an elderly woman quietly standing by a gas station, counting coins to buy an expired loaf of bread. They are the ones from the generation that built the foundation of the American dream. And they are also the first ones to be turned away by that very dream. Have you ever imagined that after a lifetime of working, when you reach the age of 70, your home is not a warm house, but a cold truck? This is the heartbreaking story of an individual over 70 years old who was once a hard-working, educated, and skilled laborer, but now has to struggle to survive in a park near the Detroit Metro Airport. They have no home, no hot meals, and not even a place to take a proper shower. Retirement money? Yes, but not enough. Housing for the elderly? Overcrowded, no room to squeeze in. Want to get a job? No one hires an elderly person, even if they have all the qualifications and experience. Those are the difficulties that this individual is enduring. They once had a stable life, but then everything fell apart. They developed diabetes, which led to a series of dental problems that they couldn't afford to treat, and became homeless. However, this individual is still luckier than many others, because at least they have a truck to sleep in overnight. As an elderly citizen, this individual cannot afford to rent an apartment. Even the housing for the elderly is too expensive for them. And this is not an isolated case. Over the next decade, the number of homeless elderly people in Michigan is expected to triple, and that is before any new crises. Their story is not unique. Thousands of elderly people in the US are becoming homeless simply because they are not rich enough to enjoy a comfortable old age. What has the government done to prepare for this crisis? The answer is almost nothing. Policymakers have had decades to address this significant demographic shift, but instead of strengthening the support system, the social safety net has been increasingly weakened. The programs that the elderly rely on to survive, such as subsidized housing, food, and healthcare, are continuously being cut due to political pressure. Now, your voice is needed more than ever. If we do not solve the affordable housing crisis, homelessness will only get worse. Will society allow people like this individual to continue being forgotten? Or is it time for us to speak up? There is one thing that is rarely mentioned in reports about the homelessness crisis in Michigan: the children. Not because they are absent, but because they are present too quietly. Just wide open eyes in the dark, silently witnessing a childhood stolen day by day. Homeless children in Michigan grow up in conditions that no child should have to endure. Many of them do not have birth certificates, do not go to school regularly, and do not have health insurance. The luckier ones go to class in donated, worn-out uniforms, oversized shoes, and backpacks filled with more anxiety than books. While other children dream of summer vacations, swimming pools, and toast with butter in the morning, homeless children dream of a place where they can sleep without hearing arguments, and a day without having to move their belongings because the shelter has been cleared. And what is even more frightening is that those children are growing up, forming their personalities in an environment where injustice and coldness are the norm. They are not nurtured with trust in society, but with survival skills in indifference. No one helps them have the opportunity to live and nurture their dreams like other normal children. They only learn that to survive and exist in an environment no different from a war zone. The tragic case of the children found dead in a Detroit apartment in April 2024, suffering from neglect, further underscores the dire circumstances some families face. While not directly linked to homelessness, such incidents reveal the extreme vulnerability of children in poverty and the systemic failures that can lead to such heartbreaking outcomes. These children were living in conditions that no child should have to endure, highlighting the urgent need for a stronger social safety net. The government is not completely silent. There have been efforts to some extent to mitigate the severe impact of the homelessness crisis on children. Some overnight shelter programs have been opened specifically for families with young children. Some schools have experimented with providing free breakfast, donated uniforms, and support for students without a legal residence address. However, all those efforts have not yet achieved viable results. The system is still overloaded. Shelters are insufficient. Support programs are limited by temporary budgets or interrupted by cumbersome bureaucratic procedures. Many families with young children are still denied acceptance because they do not meet the criteria. And while the city debates long-term plans, the children continue to grow up in a reality that is short-lived, precarious, and full of scars. When the authorities are still struggling with targets, when the budget is still adjusted according to priorities detached from reality, the children continue to sleep in cars, go to school with empty stomachs, and learn to hide the truth about what they call home. Will those homeless children become anyone? When a child does not know the love of society, can they become a citizen who loves society in the future? And if today we turn a blind eye to the innocent eyes of children looking up from under the bridge, then tomorrow, who will save us when those children grow up without trust in anyone? Amid Michigan's widening housing crisis, one thing remains constant: the quiet efforts of local people, neighbors, faith groups, volunteers, who step in where public systems fall short. These unsung heroes are building bridges where the system has created chasms, offering glimmers of hope in what often feels like an overwhelming darkness. Detroit churches have also begun opening their basements at night. Once used only for youth groups or choir practice, they now provide sleeping cots, hygiene kits, and a quiet place for people to rest without fear. Volunteers rotate shifts. Local restaurants donate leftovers. And while space is limited, the impact is not. This quiet, collective act of kindness offers a sanctuary for those who have nowhere else to turn, a testament to the enduring spirit of community. In Traverse City, students at a community college started a mobile shower program after hearing a classmate had been sleeping in her car. What began as a class project now provides 3 weekly stops, free hygiene products, and laundry access, funded almost entirely through small donations and mutual aid groups. Even in places like Saginaw and Battle Creek, where resources are scarce, people are getting creative. Urban gardens sprout behind abandoned buildings. Clothing swap tables pop up in public parks. Some residents have formed neighborhood watch-style wellness groups to check in on elderly neighbors and those without stable housing. None of these efforts come with big budgets or official recognition. They operate on compassion and determination, and a sense of responsibility toward the places people still call home, even when home no longer has 4 walls. People who once experienced homelessness are becoming leaders in the recovery process. A former Marine in Ann Arbor now trains shelter staff on trauma-informed care. A woman who lived in her van for 18 months in Lansing now helps others apply for housing vouchers, using the knowledge she gained through lived experience. These stories don't erase the crisis, but they offer something different: possibility. A reminder that change doesn't always start from above. Sometimes it begins with one person seeing another and choosing to act. They are a powerful counter-narrative to the despair, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. There are things you won't see when driving past Michigan's tall glass towers or new apartment builds. You won't see the nurse sleeping in her car after a late shift. You won't hear the quiet sigh of a retired machinist stretching $900 across rent, utilities, and medication. But that doesn't mean they aren't there. They are. Right in the middle of the state that once symbolized American resilience and working-class pride. Right beneath the billboards that promise revitalization and modern living. And perhaps the Michigan dream still lives. But for too many, it's become a version they can no longer afford, a version they can only watch from the sidelines. This video does not seek to dramatize nor to pass judgment. It simply holds up a mirror to reflect what often goes unseen. Because sometimes, the things we turn away from are the things we most need to understand. What do you think about Michigan's growing housing crisis? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. And if this video gave you something to think about, Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on the stories that truly shape our cities. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.